am Dr Audrey Tang. I'm a chartered psychologist and I'm here today on We Are Fit and Well to burst a few myths about stress. Now, we are not supposed to be living in a state of chronic stress, even though many of us do. And another thing that we also need to know about stress is that whilst it's okay not to feel okay, we have people to help us with that. It's actually also not okay to go through life just being fine. It's something that a lot of us in Britain always tend to say when someone says, "How are you?" "I'm fine." Do you really mean that? Or do you actually mean, "You know what, I'm struggling"? Or do you mean, "I'm amazing, but I don't really want to say that"? Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about stress and what it does to us, but in particular, I'm going to give you some practical tools to make sure that you can boost your winter well-being, especially as it gets darker outside. So let's make a start. When it comes to burnout, what that actually is, or it can be described as, is our body's physical response to something that has been giving us constant pressure and a constant challenge. And what actually happens when it comes to burnout is our body gets placed under a certain amount of stress. That stress continues and continues and continues, and eventually, if nothing alleviates it, if the stress doesn't go away, the body either snaps, we become physically ill, or just ceases to function as anything helpful or useful. The reason for this is when we get a sense of pressure or threat, our brains start releasing cortisol. That's the stress hormone. And that helps make our body feel very focused. It gives us that tunnel vision. It keeps us in that high state of anxiety or adrenaline in order to fight whatever it is or to run away from it successfully. But unfortunately, our bodies are not meant to withstand that kind of pressure for that amount of time. So when it comes to stress busting, there are really two things that we need to do. The first is we actually need to reduce the amount of cortisol that's produced. And the second thing is we can release that feeling and get back to that sense of calm a lot sooner. But because I come from the School of Positive Psychology, what I also like to do is once we are feeling calm, I like to give you ways that you can thrive. And the reason for that is once we get into that sense of calm and once we get into that sense of, "Oh, I'm feeling all right now," the last thing I want you to be doing is getting involved in other people's psychodramas, because then the cycle of constant pressure and burnout starts again. So today I'm going to start with 5 ways that we can actually reduce the amount of cortisol produced and or restore our state of calm a lot faster. But then the other 5 methods and tools are going to be ways that we can actually learn to flourish and make the most of the time that we've saved and the energy that we've saved because we've been able to live in that state of calm. So one of the first things to do is simply get outside. Now, I've mentioned this in other sessions before, and every expert seems to mention go outside. And I was called out in one of those sessions. One of the speakers, in fact, said to me, "You know what, I'm told that all the time. Does something magical happen when we go outside?" And actually the answer is, yes, it does. But you have to go outside at least more than once. When we go outside, the sunlight naturally stimulates production of vitamin D, which improves our immune system. It also stimulates the serotonin receptors. If we're outside with friends and having a giggle, we're also producing oxytocin. So those are some of the benefits, as well as the brain getting a lot more oxygenated. Further to which, humans are biophilic. It means that we are naturally drawn to things that are of nature. Research has shown that if you sit in a hospital bed and you're recovering and you can see a tree outside your window, you're more likely to recover faster than someone who doesn't see any form of nature. Alternatively, when we think about going outside, GPs are now prescribing forest bathing, walking through a pine forest, because we have rejuvenating properties of pine. So just simply walking through the pine forest, smelling the pine, that can make us feel a lot better too. But to answer the question about does something magical happen outside, it only does after repeated occasions. It's a little bit like taking antibiotics. It's a little bit like taking anything that is getting to the root of the issues. If you are trying to change the neuroplasticity of your brain, if you're trying to change the chemistry going on in there and make it more positive, you have to do it more than once. It's a little bit like taking antibiotics. You actually have to take more than one tablet to really feel the effects, because that's trying to attack the root of the problem. So whilst tip number 1 is get outside, the second part of that, or the caveat, is you do need to keep on doing it to really experience the benefits. Tip number 2, as adults, we don't play nearly enough. When we play, what we tend to do is we play for targets or goals or with rules. And if you simply said to somebody, just play, if I said that to you right now, just play, we don't know what to do. Here's an idea of one thing that you can do. And one thing that I did was I stuck googly eyes on my bin. I found this hilarious, and I now wish I'd done it to all my neighbours' bins as well. But that was one of my examples of playing. Another example of simply playing is the game I like to call my best man challenge. And that is, I like challenging best men, which is probably why I don't get invited to weddings very often. I like challenging them to put the word lavatorial or put a certain word into the best man speech. So here's my challenge to you, to simply play. Get the word penguin into a sentence. If you can get it into a work sentence, even better, if you see what I did just then. Next tip, tip number 3. Build yourself a positivity reservoir. Now, the reason why I'm suggesting all of these things is because oxytocin, the hormone which makes us feel loved, the hormone which reminds us we are loved, that's a really powerful counterbalance to the production of cortisol. It has been shown that people report less stress when they're able to see loved ones or they're able to talk through a problem. It's also been shown in research that if a child about to go into surgery strokes a pet, they actually produce less cortisol, the stress hormone, when they are in the surgery and after it. So again, as I said from the start, what we're trying to do is either reduce the amount of cortisol produced or alternatively get rid of it when it actually is produced, because we do have to face stress at some point. So the positivity reservoir is something where you can remind yourself that you've made an impact on the world, that you matter, that you did things that made you smile. And the positivity reservoir is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful tool, especially because a lot of the time we're not very good at taking compliments. Does this resonate with any of you guys out there? Do any of you think, oh my goodness, when someone thanks me, I go, oh no, it wasn't me. It was the team. It was everybody else. And you pass on the credit. And you know what? You do this because you are lovely, lovely people. And I don't want you to stop being lovely people. But I do want you to hear the thanks yourself. So one thing that I suggest for a positivity reservoir is, if clients or if customers or if friends give you thanks for something, screenshot it, hold it, save it, remind yourself that someone bothered to say thank you. And the second reason why I ask you to hold that thanks very dearly is, let's think in our normal lives, we're very, very fast to complain. But we're less quick to give thanks to people. I know I'm very fast to write letters of complaint, but do I really balance that out with letters of gratitude and letters of thanks? Not often. So if a client, if a customer, if a friend has actually bothered to put pen to paper or to say something kind to you, that is really like picking out a gift that's lovely, thinking about it, wrapping it up and offering it to you, and then you say, oh no, it wasn't me. If you receive the thanks, you are holding what they have bothered to offer, and you've made them feel good as well. So one of those things in your positivity reservoir is to remember to hold those thanks very, very dear. And even if you start feeling a little bit embarrassed at first, just try the phrase, thank you for saying that. That's really kind of you. Or even, that's made my day. That can really make a difference to how we handle things and how we think about ourselves. Other things you can put into the positivity reservoir are photographs, memories, things that make us feel really happy. Because then you can simply look at them, and just looking at something that makes us smile again generates that positive brain chemistry. So that kind of brings me on to the fourth tip, which is gratitude. Again, research has shown that people who practice gratitude regularly have lower blood pressure, they report fewer illnesses, they report a greater sense of happiness. So, you know, give it a try. But a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to do a gratitude journal. It takes too long. All right, you don't have to. Try this instead. Simply stretch out your arms. Do it right now. Stretch out your arms. And what I'd like you to do is, as you stretch, I want you to think about one person you are grateful for in your life. One person you are grateful for in your life. And then stretch out your legs. And what I'd like you to do is to think about one thing you are grateful for in your life. And then I'd like you to shake out. And after you've shaken everything out, I'd like you to think about one thing you have enjoyed today. That took seconds. You can do that before you get out of bed. You can do that before you get into bed or go to sleep. But there's a secret with doing this particular practice. If you do it, say for 7 days, okay, and you will notice patterns come up. You will notice things constantly come up. You will notice people constantly come up in your thanks. And you'll notice things and people also in your life don't come up. And this is the secret. When it comes to building a positive network, we often think, oh my goodness, there's so many toxic people in my life, but I don't know how to say no to them. I don't know how to politely tell them I don't need you in my life. If you do that gratitude practice, and if you recognize the patterns that are actually forming, then what I suggest you do is actively get involved with those things, those people that always come up in your gratitude stretch. And then, if you're actively involved with them, anyone else who comes along, this will only take a minute, and you're just thinking, I really don't want to, you can simply say, I'm really sorry, I'm busy. Okay, next thing. I would like to give you a tip in order to regulate your breathing, to regulate your sense of calm when you are stressed, because the other 4 things will actually be the 4 things which will help you become calm. The last thing will be this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which will help you calm down when you're feeling stressed. Now, I use the word calm down very, very carefully, because if you're like me and you're stressed and someone says to you, calm down, that makes me mad. That makes me absolutely more stressed. So try this technique, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. When you're stressed, look around, name 5 things you can see. Then, whilst you're still in that moment, outside your head now, because you're looking around, 4 things you can hear. 3 things you can touch. 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. That is a beautiful way to start becoming a little bit calmer. Again, the reason for that is the stress response that I've been talking about is an evolutionary response. It is there because when we used to be hunter-gatherers, when we used to be running through jungles and fighting lions and tigers and bears, oh my, we needed that response. We needed to be able to act fast to the stimulus that was going on in the environment. However, the stresses now, the stresses in everyday 21st century living are things like, well, somebody got a promotion instead of me. I didn't get enough likes on my Instagram post. I think someone's cheating on me. Those are horrible things to happen, perhaps, yes. But Some of them we could be magnifying in our heads. And unfortunately, our brain can't always tell the difference. So the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique is there in order to get you out of your head. Telling yourself to calm down is not going to make any difference, because telling yourself to calm down is simply going to get you back into your head. But by looking outside, by doing something which doesn't take that brain power to work on itself, but actually directs it outwards, that encourages your breathing to calm, to slow, and it helps you be able to clear that headspace so you can think about your response. None of this is to say that emotional reactions are wrong. You are always allowed to feel as you feel. However, you are also able to choose how you respond. And that's the important thing. So, as I said from the start, the first 5 things will be to either reduce the production of cortisol, and that's by building up our positive energy, by building up our positive resources, but also to dissipate the cortisol after a stressful event. The next 5 tips are here in order to make sure that when you have been able to claim back some of that time and energy, you don't get involved in other people's psychodramas. Now, these, I actually have some exercises for you. It is not Squid Game. I have only drawn the diagrams because there's no point me doing the writing, because it's going to be mirrored and then it'll be too confusing. The first one, you may know this as the time management grid. And the way this works is, if something is urgent and important, you put it in one quadrant. If it's urgent but not important, you put it in another. If it's important but not urgent, you put it in a third. And then if it's not important and not urgent, you put it in the fourth. So that's the time management grid. And the way this works in training sessions is we get people to put all of their priorities in, and then we get them to look at the priorities, and then we ask them to move things around and maybe take things off. But I'm actually going to give you a really simple way of clearing some time and making sure your priorities are absolutely what you want them to be using this. If something is urgent and important, if you have to do it and it has to be done now, do it. It is as simple as that. Get it done. The next 3 is when this grid becomes more useful. Anything you've got in the urgent but not important category. Now that means it has to be done, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it. That can be things like picking the children up from school, loading the dishwasher, walking the dog, making dinner. Those things do not necessarily need to be done by you, okay? They can be done by other people. If that is the case, then what you do is you delegate. You delegate those things. However, there is of course a caveat. You do need to delegate very carefully. What I mean by that is, when it comes to delegation, you need to make sure the person you delegate to has the capacity to be able to do it, and the ability to do it, the tools to do it, and also the know-how. And part of that is you explaining what you want done very clearly. An example of how delegation can be done very badly is, for example, if I were to say to you, bake me a cake, and you would say, yeah, I'll bake you a cake. You might come up with a chocolate cake, or a vanilla sponge cake, or a cheesecake. If in my head I have red velvet cake, part of delegation is saying so. So when it comes to delegation, if it's not working out, don't always go straight to blaming the other person. Question yourself first. Was I absolutely clear? Did that person know how to do it? Did they have the ability to do that? Did they have the tools to do it? So we've either done it or we've delegated it. Next thing, if it is not urgent but it is important, you do it. Now these are things such as meeting friends, or someone else's appraisal, or hiring or firing somebody. Maybe you can't delegate those tasks to other people because it's important you do them. Great. Right. In that case, delay them. Delay them because they're not urgent yet. Obviously, don't delay them too long, because if they become urgent and important, if they move upwards, then you're going to have to get them done. But anything that falls into important but not urgent, delay it until you've cleared some of those things on the do. Finally, the last one If it's not urgent and not important, you delete it. That's easy. Okay, it's easier said, perhaps not so easily done. That means things like scrolling mindlessly through social media or following accounts and getting upset by the ones that don't spread joy. But again, this is your time and your energy. You need to choose to spend it. What I will say to you is time and energy are valuable commodities and they are only finite. Please spend them wisely. You only have 24 hours in a day. And research suggests that we only have, of those, about 6 really, really good hours. And if you spent those hours already chasing after other people's psychodramas, you don't have a lot of time for yourself. So, how do you get time for yourself? Next exercise. This is, you'll have seen this as the well-being wheel. Very simple. You can draw as many pies in your wheel as you like. As you can see, I've drawn 3 and they're different sizes there, and then I've left that semicircle free. Now, this is simply a tool, and you can use this tool however you like to use this tool. You don't have to use it for well-being. I use it with university students, and in that case, we can actually use it to work out a dissertation. I'm going to teach you how to use the tool, but you can apply it however you wish. So, if, for example, you want to use this for the goal of well-being, that's the first thing you have to do. You have to write down what you're using this tool for. So write down your goal. It might be well-being. It might be ruling the world. It might be becoming the next Olympic champion. It might be getting my PhD finished. Whatever it is, write down that goal and know what that goal is. Then, in the segments, you divide the wheel up into as many segments that you need in order to get things done. So for a PhD, it might be I need to do all of my interviews and transcribe them. It might be I need to do my reading, like my literature review. It might be I need to write my introduction. That's how you might divide it. Alternatively, if you are doing well-being, what you might do is you might say, well, actually, I'm going to have to break this down a bit more. So I might have family as the most important thing here, or I might have finances there. I might have career here, and so on. This is simply a tool. You put in what is meaningful to you. This is how you use it. On a scale of 0 in the middle and 10 on the outside, I want you to mark on the scale where you are on all of them. So, for example, if we were talking about your dissertation and you have done all of your interviews and you're very happy and that's about an 8, you'd mark it around there. If you haven't really done much of your reading and it's like 1 or 2, then you mark it down there. Similarly, if we were using this to look at well-being, if one of your well-being points was seeing friends and you haven't really seen many friends, then you mark it there. If another one is family, but you've seen them a lot, you mark it there. If another thing is career and you've done that really well, you mark it there. And you end up with something that looks a little bit like that. The reason why you need a visual is actually because we kid ourselves if we don't get what's in our head out onto paper. And just by doing this, you might begin to recognise, hang on a minute, my life is feeling a little bit off balance, or I'm not really getting as much of my PhD done as I'm supposed to, or I'm not feeling as great as I want to feel. And that's because not all of this is in balance. You have been spending a lot of time on certain areas at the neglect and the expense of others. So, what do you do when you've freed up all that time? The normal thing is you will go and probably spend it on the thing that you already enjoy doing. And I know that because I can see you already enjoy doing it. What I would suggest you do is actually, once you've freed up that time, go and spend it on the thing that's been neglected. But when I say spend it on the thing that's been neglected, you don't need to do massive things. You don't need to, if say you've been feeling neglected by, you've neglected your friends, you don't need to throw a massive party. You just need to do something that pushes it up from a 2 to a 3. And that might be giving one of them a call and having a chat, sending one of them a silly WhatsApp message or a message on Instagram or whatever it might be. Saw this and I thought of you. So it doesn't have to be massive. It just needs to push it up one little notch. But once you've freed up that time, you know what to focus on. And the reason I put those two exercises together is because when we free up our time, when we're feeling positive, when we've built ourselves up and we're not feeling stressed anymore, your goals, what you want, is where you need to look next. Not looking around and getting involved and drawn into things which actually have maybe nothing to do with you, or you end up thinking, oh, why am I involved in this? Why am I going around in circles in this person's issue? So if you have your goal and you know what it is you need to do, it's very easy. You apply all the time and the energy you've saved into doing your thing. Now, next exercise, exercise number 7, I think it is. No, 8 now. Exercise number 8 is, it is a lot easier to do all of these things when we have amazing, supportive people around us. But very much like the gratitude exercise, how many of you know who those people are? Try this. You don't have to draw a cup of tea. The reason why I've drawn a cup, and you can draw a few of them, is because I think a tea is something that's warm, it's like a hug in a mug, it makes me feel better, but it also takes time, okay? That's why I say tea. So, I want you, when you've got a few mugs, write down the names of the people with whom you would be happy to share that cup of tea. And when you've written down their names, write inside them why. Write inside that cup of tea why that person is so important. So it might be that you put down your best friend and it's because they are funny, they've got a great sense of humour, and that you can be yourself with them, and they're kind, or they're intelligent, or they're generous, or they're loyal. Whatever those traits are, write those down. Then move on to the next person that you've got written down in another cup and do the same thing. Now, there's a few things I want you to do with that information. Once you have identified the values that you find important, be them. Work to behave in those ways every single day, or simply pick one of them and say to yourself, set that intention the next day, I am going to be kind. I'm going to respond with kindness. And don't forget, if say that was your intention, kindness does not necessarily mean solving other people's problems or doing things for other people. Kindness can sometimes just mean not getting involved. It can simply mean not being mean. So don't get yourself too confused. Think about what it means to you. Think about what that friend does. Behave in that particular way. Second thing I want you to do when you have identified those people and you've identified their values, tell them. Tell them. Now, I do this in my classes a lot. I say to my classes, you can get your phones out now and you can text people and you can tell them why they made such an impact on your life. But unfortunately, I always have to give a bit of a caveat. I have to say to them, well, you better say you're in a session and the trainer said to do it, because otherwise you'll get an email back saying, are you drunk? Why do you have to be drunk to be kind, to be nice, to tell people you love them? You create that for yourself. The last couple of things, number 9, is a spices challenge. The spices challenge is finding different ways to build your self-care, and those different ways are S for spiritual, P for physical, I for intellectual, C for creative, E for emotional, SPICE, and S for social. So that means you might try meditation, you might try exercise, you might try learning a new skill, you might try poetry, you might try having an intimate conversation, you might try being involved in something volunteering or in the community. The reason I give you all of those is we often get a bit one track when it comes to self-care, but self-care can be something that either energizes us, like learning a new skill or going out for physical exercise, or relaxes us. You choose what works for you. And the reason I give the Spices Challenge is to let you explore all the different types of self-care you have. And finally, this brings me on to the very last tip, number 10. And that is, you know your goals, you're freeing up your time. I want you to have a think about what your ideal life, what your best well-being life is going to look like. And if you catch yourself doing anything tomorrow, ask yourself, Is it moving me towards my ideal or away from it? And if you take nothing else from today's session, try that one. Thank you all ever so much for having me. Do follow my Instagram, which is at Dr Audrey T, where I give little short videos every single day, or my website, which is www.draudreyt.com, where I've got loads of my blogs and articles, and you can get any of my books here. All of them have teaching points, because I believe that all of these will work in complement to any therapy that you might be going through, but also not everyone needs talking therapy. It's not for everybody. Sometimes you just need a little nudge to get back on track. Have an amazing winter. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye-bye.